Welcome to the first ever episode of our new forward podcast, EquipCast. My name is Rachel. I will be your host today. With me, I have Pastor Kirk. Welcome to the new podcast.
Hello, Rachel. Great to be here.
Thanks for being here. And Kevin, Pastor Kevin, is also joining us today. Welcome to the new podcast.
Thank you, Rach. It's good to be here as well.
Great. We are jumping in today with what is going to be not a easy conversation. There is a lot of weight and heaviness around this conversation that we'll be diving into. So just be prepared as you listen. But this past Sunday, we brought forward to our congregations about some new legislation. Well, not really new legislation. I'll let you guys unpack that. In regards to MAiD, which is also known as medical assistance in dying. And so the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada has created a great package for any Christian believers or anyone really to kind of bring forward to their MPs. And so we talked about that quickly on Sunday. And so we're using this podcast today to kind of unpack that a little bit more. And so we're going to talk about that. Kirk, do you want to start us off and just share what MAiD is and why the next several days are really important in this conversation?
Yeah, so MAiD is, if you're not familiar, it stands for Medical Assistance in Dying. And we can unpack a little bit more in this conversation why this topic matters so much for us as believers and disciples of Jesus. But at a real high level, MAiD came into law in Canada back in 2016. And since then, there's been a rapid growth in the use of MAiD in our medical system. And built into the law was the reality that in 2027, MAiD would be extended to include those who have mental illness and their ability legally to request medical assistance in dying. And so both from a perspective of being against MAiD, and we'll, like I said, we'll unpack that in a few minutes, but also our deep care and concern for those who have mental illness says that as a church, we are very concerned about this legislation and want to see this changed for the sake of protecting the lives of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing. We want to see the lives of people changed.
Yeah.
Kev, you hosted a EquipCast a couple years ago where you had a few weeks to go over the content of MAiD. Do you want to share a little bit with us today, some of the legal side of it, why this matters, and kind of how we've seen it shift over the past couple of years specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Kirk mentioned, MAiD came into being in 2016, Bill C-14 to be exact, which was passed by the Parliament of Canada in response to a case that had gone to the Supreme Court, Carter versus Canada, where assisted suicide was challenged, and the court said that to restrict someone from being given assisted suicide went against the Charter of Rights and Freedom, Charter of Rights and Freedom. And then it was in the hands of the Canadian Parliament to make it law, which they did in 2016. Bill C-14 basically defined an adult who had what they termed a grievous and irremediable medical condition, and where natural death was reasonably foreseeable. They gave them the ability to request medical assistance. Now, there's two ways this can be done. One is known as voluntary euthanasia, where they're hooked up to intravenous and they're given drugs that the doctor or nurse practitioner administers, ending in their death within a few minutes. Or assisted suicide, where a pharmacist might be involved, and they're given the drug to self-administer. In either case, it was an overturning of, I think it was an 1896 criminal code which made it a legal offense, a felony, if someone assisted in someone's death in any way. And so now this C-14 was challenged in court again in Quebec, case of Truchon, and this person challenged the proviso that said that someone's death had to be reasonably foreseeable. This person had an irremediable illness that they felt was intolerable. They wanted to end their life and felt that it was unconstitutional then to restrict it to them just because their natural death wasn't imminently foreseeable. So that resulted in Bill C-7, which established that the reasonably foreseeable part was repealed. And so basically it says that a person having an enduring physical or psychological suffering that is intolerable to them and that cannot be relieved under condition that they consider acceptable. Now, included in this was an addendum that I think originally said 17th of March 2023, it would be open to mental illness for MAiD. This then, Parliament made a subcommittee made up of independent experts, which included psychologists, psychiatrists, professors, physicians, and so forth, who did an independent study on this proviso for mental illness. And the results of that show that it was hugely problematic to hand them this very vague general term known as mental illness, and expect them to come up with some sort of agreement in terms of what constitutes a position in which someone in that state can make that decision. And so then Parliament went back and they extended that to 2024, and then it has since been extended again for good reason to 2017. And the reason being is because there's so much complication involved in just the term mental illness. And to say that someone is, their illness is irremediable, in other words, it cannot be reversed, is hugely problematic when it comes to mental illness, because there are many who can say that mental illness was part of their past, but have since emerged from that. And many of those who have said, well, had I been given the opportunity to have MAiD at that time, I would have exercised it. Whereas now that I'm in a better mental state, I'm relieved that I haven't. So you can see how opening it up to mental illness is hugely problematic.
Yeah, and I'm hearing there's so many ways that my mind is kind of spinning right now, because you look at the people who are suffering with all these illnesses. I mean, some have a more imminent death. I think that's what you're speaking of. Like, let's think about someone who has stage 4 cancer and they've been given weeks or days. We know that and can see an end. I mean, this isn't saying that makes it right. But again, with mental illness, you don't know what's on the other side and what kind of infrastructure could better benefit the lives of someone suffering with mental health. This just feels like a really, air quote, easy fix for someone when we know as believers that's not the right answer. So maybe let's talk about why MAiD does matter for a Christian, as a Christian, the sanctity of life that all people have, because I think that's really the heart behind it, is that we care for people. We want to love them like Jesus. So talk about the biblical perspective of MAiD, the value of a human because of God's love.
Yeah, and that's, you started it in the right spot, Rachel. Like, God is the creator of life. He has built into every human being, as we have talked about as a church a number of times, every single one of us is given the image of God. We carry the image of God in us, which makes a human life more valuable, more unique than any other living creature. So at the very outset, God is pro-life. All the way through. So anything that seeks to end a life is therefore anti what God is for. God is so for life that he sent his only son to die on a cross so that we wouldn't have to face eternal death. Anything that is death is purely because of the consequence of sin, which is not from God. So as Christians, we understand that at kind of a high level in terms of our salvation, but we don't often think about it in terms of our day-to-day life. There are a couple of scripture passages I just wanted to read on this particular question. In Ecclesiastes chapter 8, it says, "No one has authority over the wind to restrain it, and there is no authority over the day of death." So what the scripture is saying is that no human being has been given by God any authority over their day of death. And then if anyone in the Bible had a right to be able to say, "I would like MAiD," it would be Job. Mm-hmm. And in Job chapter 30, a second, open it up here. In Job chapter 30 and verse 23, Job even reaches a point where he says, "I know that you will lead me to death." So death is even a place, even for the Christian, death is a place that we are led to by God, not because anybody else is given the right to end our physical life. And MAiD is the opposite of that. MAiD, in its essence, is a human choosing to take their own life or to take the life of another human being, and pushing God out of the equation in the decision-making process. Mm-hmm. That's why we care so much about MAiD at a high level, because we value human life. And then when you add in MAiD and mental illness, to build off of what both of you have already said, the reality that someone with mental illness would know enough to know, is this irreversible? Am I actually going to be in this state for the rest of my life or not? To think about someone with mental illness who could have the clarity of thought to be able to make a decision around ending their own life it's heartbreaking that we would even put that in front of someone as an option for them. Mm-hmm. We have spent as a society an amazing amount of energy bringing the issues of mental health to the surface. I think about Bell Let's Talk Day and how much that has done to open up the airwaves, so to speak, to people to be able to talk about mental health and mental illness. And then to be able to say, just kidding. We don't really want you to talk about it. We want to give you the permission to just go ahead and end your life. It's heartbreaking. God is a God who heals. God is a God who restores. God is a God of life. That's who we believe we serve. Mm-hmm. And that's what we believe is his desire for human beings. And that's why that's why MAiD matters to us as Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think even when you look at Job, who had every reason to want to die, everything was thrown at him. He lost everything. He lost his wealth. He lost his family. Like, he was just at his end. And bringing it into today's context, like, we want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's do the talking about it, but also let's look to the one who can restore all that is broken.
And let's see how God shows up in those circumstances.
Yeah, and share into that. Yeah, Kev, why else do you think it matters? What else can you add to why it matters to us as believers who are living on this side of MAiD and the argument for?
Well, I think we need to understand that there are distinctly contrasting worldviews happening here. Mm-hmm. A Christian worldview and a secular worldview. And this has happened subtly, but also rapidly. So if you go back to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, in their preamble, they state the supremacy, the government acknowledges the supremacy of God, okay, on one hand. And then in their 2026 decision in C-14, they said that they acknowledge the autonomy of human beings. Okay, so we have two things in conflict. Mm-hmm. Historically, Canada has held to a Judeo-Christian paradigm, which says that God is supreme and he has the ultimate say. Now they are saying very emphatically and dogmatically that it is human autonomy. And I think human autonomy as part of a secular worldview has been largely adopted, and I think that's reflected in what we see in terms of the favorability toward MAiD, which is, last I checked, was about 80%. So about 80% of Canadians are in support of MAiD. And MAiD is also framed in a way that makes it look compassionate. In fact, KMAP, which is Canadian Medical Association of Practitioners, I think it stands for, the language they use in terms of MAiD are things such as treatment option, care option, medically effective. Like, can you imagine, we're talking about a treatment option, medically effective, is in ending someone's life. Like, the irony is, it's a tragic irony.
Medically effective is to end someone's life.
Yeah.
That's so sad.
Yeah. And underlying that, and I know that this isn't talked about, but it's financially expedient.
Yeah.
I mean, you think of the money that is saved through that, but that's a whole other discussion. I think my point is what we need to recognize as Christians is we're dealing with an entirely different worldview. And I think, first of all, we need to ask ourselves the question, am I emphatically against MAiD based upon the fact that I fully embrace the Bible's idea of the sanctity of life? If you've made room for MAiD as a Christian, I think you need to go back to the scriptures and, like some of the passages that Kirk pointed out, revisit those. I mean, God is very much clear in Scripture as to the sanctity of life and that He is the one who determines the length of days. And so that is what we're dealing with. We're talking two different languages, but what it does do for us as Christians is provides an opportunity for the gospel. And yes, there is an important voice to be had because we live in a democracy where we can have a voice and we can write our MPs, our government officials, and I think we need to do that. But we also need to recognize that the real battle is being fought in terms of our own life and how it's reflective of the gospel. Because if we don't get back to why the gospel is such good news, people aren't going to hear us.
Yeah, and I think that gets one of my favorite things about reading the Bible, and one of the things I love to encourage other people to think through is like this head knowledge. So we can grasp that head knowledge, but we need to know and learn how to practically live this out. If head to heart to hands is kind of like that that flow through. And so, practically speaking, how would you both speak into someone who is walking alongside a family member who's maybe considering MAiD, or maybe they themselves are considering this? How would you teach us to take that head knowledge and then live it out in that pastoral shepherding way? How can we love others better as believers through this heartbreaking scenario that many are living through?
And I do know some in our church who this has been their reality, and they wrestle with it. They're struggling with, how do I walk with someone, and it's heartbreaking for them to think about, how do I handle this reality? And so I want to just say, first of all, to anyone who's personally walking through what feels like maybe the final months of your own life, and MAiD is in front of you and it feels like a tempting option, I can imagine why it would be a tempting option for you. For those who are walking with someone right now who is thinking about MAiD as an option for their life, I can understand why someone might find that as a viable option for their life. On an emotional level, I can understand it. I want to just say, first of all, always understand this. Whoever you are, wherever you are, the God of the universe does love you. And one of the things that we don't often understand in Scripture is how God uses even our suffering to conform us more and more into the image of Jesus. We talk a lot here at Forward about us growing as disciples of Jesus. And I've watched many, many older saints in their final days and months of life. And one of the beautiful things that I have seen time and time again is how in their final months of life, it is still a moment where they are acknowledging that they're learning how to become like Jesus even in death. And so this is still an opportunity. The path of suffering in life is still an opportunity for the Christian to identify with Christ, to learn the mind of Christ and the heart of Christ. Suffering is sometimes something in a North American culture, especially, we really do everything possible to avoid any type of suffering. The scriptures speak quite candidly about how God uses suffering for our ultimate good. And so I don't say that to judge anyone. I just want to say, like, see this as a continued opportunity in your own life rather than taking another path. See this opportunity to experience the closeness of God. And the other thing I would say, if you're walking with someone right now who's going through this, if what Pastor Kevin said earlier, I wholeheartedly agree with. Sometimes we're talking about two totally different worldviews. So someone who maybe is not a believer and you're walking with them, you're upset because they're choosing MAiD. You're just not talking the same language as each other. So the two most important things you can do is everything possible to love that person, not necessarily endorse what their decisions are, but love them, care for them, be there for them, pray for them, let them hear you praying for them, and keep telling them how much you believe that their life has value. And that their life especially has value to a God who loves them. Because you just don't know how God's going to use that as an open door to share the gospel with those people. So that would be my best advice, is step into the pain, walk with love and grace with the person that you're journeying with.
Yeah, I think, Kirk, you said it so well. And I, in my class, even I had kind of the 3 Ps, which every pastor should have.
Absolutely. It's good alliteration.
Prayer, presence, and promise, which is basically what you built out there. We have to be very prayerful in terms of our own heart preparation, but also prayerful with them. And I think prayer, both for the believer and unbeliever, offers a bridge of opportunity to minister to the believer, but also as a voice of gospel to the unbeliever. And there have been very, very few unbelievers over the years who, when I've asked them if I could pray for them or with them, most of them have said yes. And so it's a great opportunity. But like Kirk said, the power of presence, to be there, to have that heart of compassion, and to pray that you exude the hope. I mean, Peter says, be ready to give a reason for the person who asks for the hope that you have. So to have... and it's that hope beyond the grave that so often these, people who exercise this right don't have, and to offer them that hope, and then promise, and the promises of Scripture are true, and they're there for us, and we need as believers to have a theology of suffering. To go back to the writings of Paul, who recounts his unbelievable road of suffering, not just physical, but relational and psychological and emotional and so forth and so on. Yet, in his final days, he writes, I want to know him, Jesus, and the power of his resurrection, and what? The fellowship of sharing in his suffering, to be like him into his death. And so Paul there is, I think, introducing us into an intimacy with Christ, which can only be had through suffering. And this isn't to make light and somehow, glibly sort of introduce these theological things to someone who's actually going through it. We should probably let our words be few, but have the understanding that there is purpose in suffering. See, to the unbeliever, suffering is purposeless.
That's right.
But for the believer, suffering has purpose.
Yeah, and to me, when I just listen to both of you, it's that reminder to be lights in the darkness. We want to be people who reflect the light of Christ into a broken and hurting world and show up for them. I think we can all agree that people want to be seen and valued. And while I know that doesn't necessarily fix everything that someone who is struggling through mental health in whatever way, but just showing up and saying, I'm here for you in whatever way is just even that great starting point of just being with people, bearing with one another in love, which we are called to. We can't give all the answers, and we could probably go on about all of these topics in depth for hours on end, but hopefully this conversation has started to get people thinking through how they can love well and walk through these conversations with others. And maybe it even opens the door to have these conversations in your home or, you don't necessarily want to do it at Christmas time, but if it comes up, these are helpful conversations we often sweep under the rug, but just starting that conversation. What's really important among all the things we've already talked about is this legislation that is coming. And we have had asked on Sunday, and we will continue to ask people to contact their MPs. So do you want to talk a little bit about what this is, why it matters, and how we can go through addressing this, the practical, hands-on? This is an actionable step that people can take right now.
Yeah, it is. I want to say, I'll answer that question in a sec, but also want to say, if you are listening to the podcast and you are struggling with any of the things that we're talking about personally, or just trying to understand what the scriptures say about this, please reach out to us. Like we would love to sit down with you, to hear your story, to pray with you, to walk with you into some scriptures and allowing the Lord to speak into your situation. So please don't see this just as a one-way conversation. We would love to hear from you on that. The legislation that is in front of the House of Commons right now is actually a private member's bill. It's Bill C-218. It was brought to the House in June of 2025. It is currently set to go for a vote probably shortly after the Christmas break into the beginning of 2026. There's some procedural things that need to happen in the month of December. I know if you're watching this like a year later, it's probably too late, but for those of you who are watching this in November 2025, and this is the timing that we're on right now, which is why there's a sense of urgency to communicate to your MP. We are asking you to encourage your MP to vote in favor of this motion. And what the motion does is to remove mental illness from the MAiD legislation. Unless it's removed at some point by someone, it will become law for people with mental illness to be able to receive MAiD. We are part of a group of churches across Canada called the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada. We're a member of this organization. And if you're not familiar with them, what they do is they represent the Christian community really in Ottawa. They are heavily engaged and connected with members of parliament and the political process, and they understand what the evangelical community believes about different issues and what we believe Scripture teaches. And so for us as pastors, when the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada says this is an opportunity and a moment for Christians in Canada to speak into something, those are the times where we want to respond and act. We have a lot of trust in their knowledge, their wisdom, their information that they have in front of them that nobody else has. And so when they come to us and say, hey, would you guys encourage the people in your church to get involved in this process and make their voices heard to their MP? That for us is a moment of going, okay, if someone as reputable as the EFC is asking us to speak into this, we will give a serious look at it. And that's why we're stepping into this moment in asking you to contact your MP. So that's it in a nutshell in terms of what the legislation is. It's pretty simple and straightforward. And we're just asking you to ask your MP to vote in favor of this bill to remove mental illness from the MAiD legislation.
And the EFC has made it easy. They've already drafted some letters, so you don't even have to think about it on your own. It's all created. We're going to link this in our show notes, so it makes it easy for you. You can just go in there and read through. You can do your own reading on top of what we've already shared and just become more aware of the conversation that is happening. Any final remarks from either of you today that you want to share with those who are listening?
I just want to say from even just a broader standpoint, so yes, everything that Kirk said, I think absolutely. This is a vital an important opportunity for us to act practically. From our own daily walk with God, I think it's very important that we stay informed, and that we aren't just simply informed from social media feed, but we're
Very
actually
important. That's a very important point.
yeah. And it's not so much that we have to have an in-depth knowledge of everything, because there's so much going on, but I think it is important as citizens of Canada to have an understanding of who our leaders are, both locally, provincially, and nationally, and what are the key pieces of legislation that specifically pertain to us and maybe contradict what we believe to be vitally important. And I'm reminded of Paul's words to Timothy in 1 Timothy 2:1-3. I exhort you, I encourage you, I plead with you to offer supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving for all people, for kings and all who are in authority, that we may live quiet and peaceable lives in all godliness and reverence. And so again, to recognize the power of prayer. And to do that on a daily basis, we need to lift our leaders, whether or not you agree with their political platform. We need to lift them in prayer.
Yep.
And we have all sorts of precedents throughout Scripture of men and women who served under tyrants, yet were submissive in as much as they were, they didn't contradict God's laws, and where they needed to, they stood up. And some lost their lives, but then to pray daily for our leaders and watch what God does.
Yeah. And I just want to build off of what Kevin said and say, hey, if you're going to stay informed, a couple of great places for you to stay informed, which I would wholeheartedly agree, you need to stay informed. The Evangelical Fellowship of Canada has their website. It's anybody can go and look, and they're constantly posting updates and information on political issues from a Christian worldview perspective. So you can go there. Another organization is Cardus, C-A-R-D-U-S. They are a Christian-based organization that also does a lot of research around political issues. Check them out. Great places to get good information from. Please, 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 please do not just take your information from somebody's Facebook or Instagram post and take it as gospel truth. Go to some people who know and are living in Ottawa and interacting in Ottawa. That will be good. And then as you interact in this, for some of you, I know what we're asking you to do is going to stretch you. And I want to encourage you to allow God to stretch you. And for some of you, you're chomping at the bit to write a letter, and I want to encourage you to make sure you represent Jesus well when you write your letter. Those would be the things I would say is my final word.
Yeah.
Those are wonderful reminders. And pray, seek wisdom, be discerning, use the mind that God has given you to serve others well. Thank you both for taking the time to just dive a little bit deeper into what was not a easy conversation. There are emotions on all ends of it, but really appreciate you taking the time to do that for us, Forward Church, but also globally for the watching world. And so thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
If you're listening, you're part of Forward, you are struggling through any mental health or any challenges you're facing, we are here for you. We have our pastors and our care team would love to have a conversation with you. But even more important, I think, than that, if you have just found this podcast because you were searching MAiD and you are hurting and broken and want to know the hope that we are sharing, please reach out, because we would love to continue conversations with you as well. And so thanks again, and join us next time for our next episode on the EquipCast podcast.